Well, good morning. Welcome back to Project Lamport. My name's Craig Morgan. I head up the R&D, and today we're going to take you through the main reasons why we're at Project Lamport to begin with. In our previous and subsequent videos, we've concentrated quite a lot on soil health, but one of the main reasons why we came into this field is that we want to keep it into combinable cropping, and we had a massive problem of blackgrass. This field here has over 2,000 heads per square metre. And consequently, last year we couldn't even harvest the winter wheat because of blackgrass control. So we had to try and devise a system where we could minimise the use of chemicals and keep combinable cropping going in this part of the world. This consisted basically of growing a cover crop followed by a spring crop. And what we'll try and explore today is how we've established the cover crops during the springtime. When we grow winter wheat in this crop, we have complete failures at times, even though we've used over 140 to 150 pounds worth of hectare of chemicals. And use of chemicals is becoming a completely unsustainable solution for us in controlling blackgrass in this part of the world. We're in this plot here to begin with, and as you can see, as we look along here, our objective has been achieved. We have no blackgrass showing in this in any shape or form, which is the vital part for this project for us as well. So I want to try to explore now with Neil how we've established this cover crop and how we've achieved this level of blackgrass control.
Okay, yeah, well, the establishment of the cover crop in this plot, if we go right back to when Project Lamport first started 7 years ago, our maximum objective that autumn was to get as much blackgrass growing as we could in the shallow profile. We knew we didn't want to go deep with soil movement. We're just looking to really just mix the soil up on the surface. Part of our armoury of machinery within the trials team was the combi drill, the power harrow combi drill, so it was natural that we were going to use that. So this plot, for the 7 years, every year we've established the cover in the autumn with a combination drill, which has given us good establishment. But we know from a soil health point of view and soil structure how bad that combination drill has been for the actual soil.
Neil, last year we got to a situation where our blackgrass levels in our standard winter wheat was so high we couldn't harvest it, despite spending, as I say, 130, 140 pounds worth of hectare on chemicals. What kind of yield potential did you average expect across the 7 years of this spring wheat?
Well, across the 7 years, we've consistently, you'd say our average is running between sort of 7.5 tonne to the hectare with the spring wheat. We have been up as high as sort of 8.5, sort of 8 3/4 on some of our better spring wheats. And in the poorer years, we've been down no lower than about 6.5 tonne, but we would always budget on 7 to 7.5 tonnes to the hectare.
And our blackgrass control has been phenomenal, has it not? We've come down from less than 2,000 heads per square metre to an average of 3 to 4 heads per square metre. And did we achieve that very rapidly?
We almost achieved the blackgrass control literally from these cover crop spring wheats has been overnight.
So I've just dug a spade's worth out of this profile just to have a look at the structure, and the key things you're looking for are roots, really, where the roots of the crop are, how well they've got down, and then the visible porosity, how open or how tight the soil is. And if you can focus in here, you can see that from the surface down we've got quite a tight layer here, which is often quite indicative of a power harrowing type action where you've stirred the soil, you've really destabilised the structure, and then with all the rain and the bad conditions we've had over the late autumn and winter, that's just washed together. These high silt content clays here around here, always very prone to slumping and running together. So you can see, whilst we have got some roots down to depth, they're relatively few, and the majority of them are here in the surface, trying to get through, really. And it's a bit of an effort to break this apart, as you can probably tell, and not an awful lot of roots in the middle of that, just a few. Where we can see roots down through, there's a natural crack here. It started where the drill has created a slit. The weaving has lifted the actual flap of the soil up and has created the starting point for a crack, and then The soil has dried out, the roots have got down through there in the process of ultimately the soil drying out and cracking now. But there are pathways every drill pass, but it's the bit in the middle. If we can't exploit all of this soil in the middle between the drillings because the porosity is relatively low, then clearly we're not going to get the best out of the soil, the reserves and the capacity that's in the soil.
Okay, now we're going to move into plot 4. It's exactly the same, 7th year of harvest of spring wheat. We've just established the cover crop differently to the previous crop in plot 3. We've known to use the combination drill isn't the right thing for us to do, and Neil will explain to you how we've established this crop differently to plot 3. But importantly, we still don't have blackgrass, whichever way we do it. Our level of blackgrass control in here is still phenomenal to what it would be if this was a winter crop treated with normal herbicides.
Right, so the method of establishment of the cover in here differs from system 3 there, in that we've direct drilled the cover crop in here. We've realised the error of our ways, which Philip's just demoed to you in system 3, the damage we're doing to the soil using the power harrow drill combi. So the question was, how do we establish our covers without damaging the soil? The key learning thing here that we've come in with, one is obviously soil conditions below ground have got to be right for direct drilling, but more importantly, when we're direct drilling, the residue management of the previous crop has got to be tip top. So we've used the straw rake in here, and then we've come in with a weaving GD drill and direct drilled straight in, and you can see very little blackgrass about, but we've had reasonably good cover establishment.
And our soil health will be better.
Okay, so as a comparison, it felt different when I was digging it on the spade. You can see far more cracks through the profile. It's not as tight in large lumps. Roots are getting through, but basically we've got a slightly more friable profile. We haven't got that evidence of really severe slumping near the surface to quite that extent. See, I can just sort of pull that apart, didn't really have to put effort in. I couldn't break it on the other one, and that gives you a good idea of where those roots are starting to get through and into that profile now. Going down there, down the pathways, it has run together because of the nature of the season we've had. You know, you wouldn't expect any less on these soils, but we've still got a lot of pathways. And you know, from the point of view of breaking that apart, whenever I break it apart, I'm seeing roots through there. Got worm channels all over the place. You can see here, plenty of worm channels. So on average, I would say this crop's roots are exploiting the entire soil profile more efficiently than in the other plot.
Well, now we're in plot 7, which is where we have now taken away the cover crop, but still direct drilled the spring wheat. Lots of growers have asked us, is that cover crop essential for blackgrass control? Well, from an R&D perspective, the answer is quite simply yes. If you can look here, the level of blackgrass which we have in plot 7, you will not see in plot 3, 4 and 5. And that has come about because we have not had the cover crop in the autumn. Neil, as a practical farmer, have you ever questioned the value of cover crops?
Yeah, this is really interesting. It's part of my, I mentioned earlier about my learning experience over the 7 years at Project Lamport, and this has been one of my big learners, because coming back to what we've mentioned before about soil health and grassweed control, one of the big hitters, or one of the biggest hitters for blackgrass control, is spring cropping. So this plot is mimicking much of what goes on UK farms. The farmer decides he wants to widen his rotation out and grow a spring crop. So he cultivates the soil last autumn, okay? Everything's set up last autumn, but there's no cover crop gone in here. And when you watch this plot through the winter time, we see far less water infiltration going on this plot than what we get where the covers are growing. Those covers are getting the roots down, and that root is doing far more than just water infiltration. We know that it's benefiting worms because it's harvesting sunlight, it's pushing sugars out through the roots, the worms are congregating around there. But when we come to drilling time in the spring, and this is so important, the soil surface on system 3, 4 and 5 that have had the cover growing is firmly held together. Those roots are holding it together like a carpet. Whereas in here, with my farmer's hat on, I'm thinking that when I see the drill go through here, it's actually, I used to think it was doing a far better job of drilling in here than it was there, because there was a bit of dust coming up. We were getting better seed to soil contact because the soil's a little bit more friable near the surface. But what we must understand is that blackgrass control is our number one aim in here, and whilst it looks good, we're moving more soil at the surface, and that's what's causing this blackgrass to grow. So the value of that cover crop is more than just from a soil health point of view. It's giving us this blackgrass control. And when I come back to looking at plotting blackgrass levels on the graph, the first year or so we were getting reasonably good blackgrass control in this plot, but then after the first couple of years you could see that line was taking a steep upward trajectory because of all these heads that are now starting to appear. And you're only just seeing a few blackgrass at the moment. There will be a lot more come July time.
Neil, could you make a few comments of how these plots looked across the autumn and the wet winter, and what have we seen when what does the plot look like post fallow rather than cover crop?
Well, when we walk across them, and it's often the best, farmer's welly is the farmer's boot. When you walk across system 3 in the autumn, where the cover was established with a combi, you can still feel this porridgey effect of that combination drill. System 4 walks beautifully dry. System 5, there was a little bit more because we'd moved the soil more, but it's still walking pretty dry. When you got into number 7, taking our colleagues across here, you could hardly walk across the plot on a wet day because your welly boots were right out here. There was puddling going on a really wet time, and we would see just a little bit of water running off this plot as well when it got wet. So there was some big differences, Craig.
Is it fair to say, because of our choice of cover crops consisting of the black oats and Phacelia in the latter years, have created so good infiltration channels that it's fair to say we never saw standing water particularly on plots 4 and 5, irrespective of what the winter and the autumn threw at us?
Absolutely, yeah. We would never see any surface water standing about on 3, 4 and 5. Maybe if you just had an absolute torrential downpour, but within an hour or two it had infiltrated down. There's a huge difference.
So that just highlights it's not just cover crops, it's the species of the cover crops which are important as well.
Definitely, okay. Yeah. And we like that black oat. We know it's got that vigorous root system. It's getting the roots right down, and the Phacelia, slightly more fibrous root system nearer the surface, which is helping to anchor that soil together.
Okay, so just looking at the soil in System 7, just a reminder, it had quite an aggressive loosening action in the autumn and no cover crop. So it's a really good example of where we've got quite an aggressive metal, quite an aggressive stirring. That's not actually helped the blackgrass. What we've also got, the absence of those cover crop roots, you can see quite clearly here on the surface. We're almost back to square one in terms of the soil has washed back together. Although it's had metal, it hasn't had the roots. It's the combination of the two that work clearly. If you need the metal, certainly the roots essential. You can see there we've got basically low porosity soil, and I can try and break that apart. And I have probably as good a demonstration as I'm going to give you actually. The other plots where we'd got the roots through it, we'd help them in certain cases. I could break that apart easily by hand. Here I'm just not going to break this piece.
Well, we'll come to our final plot of spring wheat for today in system 12. This is my favourite plot. This is absolutely where we wanted to get to with our whole R&D at Project Lamport. First point, important point. Look, we still don't have levels of blackgrass. We still don't have level black. We can grow a crop of spring wheat in here quite successfully. But our method of establishment of the cover crop has changed completely. We're using minimal metal and we're only direct drill in the spring. And I will just pass over to Neil now to say how we want to explore this system even further, what we've learned, how we can make this better.
Okay, yeah, well this is the ultimate, if we can make this work. What we did prior to the harvesting of the previous crop, which was a crop of winter wheat in here, we came through with a Kuhn aero machine, a pneumatic, and we actually blew the cover crop mix of black oat and Phacelia down into the standing wheat crop prior to harvest. It's fair to say that in this first year that the establishment of the cover could have been a lot better. There wasn't too much of it about, particularly the black oats. There was odd Phacelias about, but from a soil health point of view and from a lack of movement of soil in our overall control of blackgrass, this is absolutely fantastic because we've not moved any soil whatsoever. We then obviously came in the spring and drilled with a weave-in just straight into the stubble. I have to say that right through the winter time, even though we didn't have the best cover crop growing in here, the fact that we'd had a previous wheat crop that was a good wheat crop, it had got all that natural restructuring of the soil through the roots from the previous wheat crop, so we didn't disturb any of that. So we got quite a lot of nice water infiltration going on that time. We're probably going to look to change our mixture slightly in here going forward and move more to smaller seeds, finer seeds, Craig?
I think so. Blowing in some finer seeds, maybe 9 or 10 days before harvest will be our objective this year.
So checking the plot out or checking the profile out in system 12, there's a number of things that jump out straight at you. The first is if we look at the friability of that soil. On average, we've got roots through to depth again. The soil's breaking apart very nicely, and we've got a very much more friable structure here. Look, you can see I can break that apart really easily, no real effort. A little bit near the surface, but it's marginal. Generally, there's a huge difference there, isn't there? As a general comparison to some of the others we've looked at. The other thing that really jumps out at you are the type of cracks that are in the soil surface itself. We have got cracks in here. We've got a canopy. We've got an armour of residue, and we have got some cracks, but they're probably more frequent than everywhere else and smaller. So we've got a greater quantity of smaller cracks, which is a good sign we've got more natural structure. And I think from that point of view, for me here, there would be absolutely no need to pull metal through this because the soils is in pretty good condition. I think you would actually make it go backwards if you try and restructure it by pulling metal through. It's not going to get any better than it is here. So it would be certainly an example to leave well alone in that respect.